In April 2021, the Japanese government decided on its basic policy for the discharge of ALPS treated water, after which TEPCO announced how it would respond in accordance with this policy. Then, in August, TEPCO announced the review status of handling of ALPS treated water and applied to the Nuclear Regulation Authority in December for permission to modify its implementation plan. TEPCO will ensure that ALPS treated water is safe and that all legal regulations have been fulfilled. And we shall ensure the safety of the public, the surrounding environment, and of agricultural, forestry, and fishery products. New sampling points for sea monitoring shall be added and the frequency of sampling increased. Furthermore, we shall ensure that monitoring is objective and transparent through cooperation with the agricultural, forestry, and fishery producers and experts. Tanks at the power station site used to store ALPS treated water are continually monitored for leaks and maintained, managed in preparation for natural disasters. We shall continually disseminate accurate information about the impact of radiation on people and the environment itself. In accordance with this basic policy, we shall make every effort to minimize any potential adverse impacts on reputation. If reputational damage occurs despite these efforts, we will carefully listen to circumstances of each individual case and will compensate swiftly and appropriately. Approximately 70% of the ALPS treated water currently being stored in tanks does not meet regulatory standards, but we shall purify this water using ALPS, etc. until it does fulfill regulatory standards. ALPS treated water that does fulfill regulatory standards will be transferred to a holding tank and then agitated to ensure that it is homogeneous. After this, the water will be measured to ensure that the concentration of radioactive substances falls below regulatory standards. Measurements and confirmation of those measurements will be performed not only by TEPCO, but also by the third parties. After this, the water will transfer from the tanks to the seawater pipe header. A large volume of seawater from outside the port will be taken in through the Unit 5 intake channel. This large amount of seawater will be mixed with the ALPS treated water transferring from the tanks inside the seawater pipe header, and after the treated water has been diluted, it will be allowed to continue on to the discharge vertical shaft. Please have a look inside the discharge vertical shaft. The flow of treated water being diluted with a large volume of seawater is stopped before the shaft becomes full. After the flow has been halted, tritium concentrations will be measured to ensure that they fall below TEPCO discharge requirements of less than 1,500 becquerels per liter. After this, the water will transfer through the discharge tunnel and be discharged into the sea. TEPCO's discharge requirement of 1,500 becquerels per liter is 1/40th that of the government's regulatory standards of 60,000 becquerels per liter. When ALPS treated water is being discharged, seawater flow will be continually monitored to ensure that there are no fluctuations. If an abnormality is detected, an emergency isolation valve will immediately be closed and pumps will be shut down. Discharge will only be recommenced after all safety checks have concluded. Through continuous sea monitoring performed to date, we have confirmed that there will be no impact on the surrounding environment, but we will add additional sampling points and increase the frequency of sampling. Please have a look at the current seawater sampling points from which tritium concentrations are being analyzed. There are 7 sampling points within 2 kilometers of the power station. In addition to these 7 sampling points, 3 sampling points will be added in the spring of 2022 within the area in which there is no fishing on a daily basis, thereby strengthening monitoring approximately a year before we plan to commence discharge. We shall also increase the frequency of sampling from the 6 sampling points within 20 kilometers of the power station. The concentration of tritium in seawater outside of 20 kilometers from the power station is currently not being analyzed, but tritium concentration shall be analyzed once a month using water from 9 sampling points. And as you can see, we are also strengthening monitoring of not only seawater, but also fish and seaweed. The results of these analyses shall be continuously disclosed along with measurements, assessments, and result from the third parties to ensure transparency. We will have IAEA, an international agency with expertise in nuclear power, examine decommissioning and our handling of ALPS-treated water from various perspectives. Expert agencies shall examine facility design, the safety of operation methods, radiation impact assessments, and the capability of radiation measurements, and provide advice and guidance, thereby enabling TEPCO to improve capability. We shall discharge ALPS-treated water into the sea, using facility with safety as a major premise and operating appropriately so as to prevent reputational damage. We shall do our utmost to provide necessary support to industries that may be affected by adverse impacts on reputation and reputational damage as a result of ALPS-treated water discharge in the production, processing, distribution, and consumption. In order to minimize reputational damage, we shall continually engage in communication so as to disseminate accurate information to parties both within and outside of Japan, and use the opinions obtained through dialogue with stakeholders concerned to continually make improvements. If reputational damage occurs despite these efforts, we will carefully listen to circumstances of each individual case and will compensate swiftly and appropriately without putting a restriction beforehand on the compensation period, area, or industry that can be compensated. We are currently making preparations to commence sea discharge approximately 2 years from when the government decided on its basic policy for the handling of ALPS-treated water. TEPCO is prioritizing safety and reducing risks in order to balance recovery with decommissioning, and we are striving to obtain society's understanding about the handling of ALPS-treated water.